My thoughts and my prayers are with her, and she represents the whole history of the Europe that is our common home with our British friends. She has given to all of us in all these years always stability, confidence. She has shown an immense amount of courage. She is a legend in my eyes, and therefore my prayers are with her.
Well, the Queen leaves a large and devoted family, one that has recently mourned the death of her husband, Prince Philip. Her 4 children, Charles, Anne, Andrew and Edward, gave her 8 grandchildren. She also leaves 12 great-grandchildren. Prince William has now become the heir to the throne at the age of 40. The royal family will now enter a period of mourning. Official engagements will be cancelled and Union flags will be flown at half-mast on royal residences, government buildings across the armed forces and United Kingdom posts overseas. Kadira and Andrew, thank you very much for staying on. Andrew, I will start with you. After the demise of Prince Philip, everything just dipped.
She certainly found that a great blow because they had been together for so long, and she relied on him a great deal, emotionally and otherwise. He was not a great diplomat. She was the sort of the wiser, calmer part of the partnership. But nevertheless, the two of them were a very strong act. And of course, she was already into her 90s when her husband died. And I think she coped with that in many ways very well. And her health, until very recently, for a woman in her mid-90s, was exceptionally good. Even 2 days ago, she was meeting the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, to actually formalise the handover from one Prime Minister to another. So she has not been shirking in her tasks. But inevitably, she's become less mobile and so has been taking a less active part. And she hasn't been out and about. She's been basically in Balmoral and not going out for now, I think about maybe 2 or 3 months. Having said that, until we got the announcement earlier today that there was medical concern about her health, there was no sense that there was any grave situation in Balmoral. So I think many people will be really genuinely shocked and surprised by her death.
Kadira, if I come to you, when we talk about the Prince Philip's demise, do you think it really played a role in the Queen's condition?
It is something that you do see, where, people who've been together for a lifetime, one partner passes away and then within the next year or two, the partner that's alive passes away because that attachment is so great. And, you have to appreciate how lonely the role of the monarch is. There's no one she can, relate to that she interacts with, really. And there's no monarch like her in Europe or the world. So, she would have depended quite greatly on Prince Philip. And, I think his passing was a very, powerful blow. But I think that, everyone can be sort of grateful that she was mobile right until the end, and she was healthy right until the end, because as we all know, with this aging population, we're seeing people have extended periods of illness before they pass away, and at least she was, quite active, and I think her determination played a role in that.
Kadira and Andrew, stay with me. Right at this moment, Londoners are converging at the Buckingham Palace following the news of the demise of Queen Elizabeth II. The UK's longest-serving monarch died at Balmoral, aged 96. After reigning for 70 years, her family gathered at her Scottish estate after concerns grew about her health. Earlier yesterday, the Queen came to the throne in 1952 and witnessed enormous social change. This is her legacy. Well, this is live at the Buckingham Palace. Londoners are currently converging following the news of the demise of Queen Elizabeth II, who died at the age of 96. She was the longest reigning monarch, and many people would remember her statement, the one she made when she took over from her father, King George VI. She said she will be loyal to Britain. Andrew and Kadira, thank you very much for staying on. Do you remember that statement that she made when she was 26 years old? Kadira?
I personally don't think I was alive for that, but I do appreciate, I guess, the way it came down to her, that her uncle had abdicated, and that's how her father got it. And so she and her father both had this very strong sense of duty that, this is not something they sought out. This was something that was handed to them, and, that loyalty to the position and to the country, I think has been why she's been so popular consistently for so long.
Andrew, do you remember the speech the young Queen made?
No, I was born several years after she came to the throne, but I know what you mean, and it did epitomise a sense of duty and public service. Mm-hmm. And that was something that her father had as well, but he was a very shy and withdrawn man. The Queen, she wasn't exuberant, but she was much more outgoing, and over the years she grew into the role. And I think the qualities that she has, the personal qualities of kindness and humility, as well as of public service, and the wisdom she developed through doing the job so well and meeting so many world leaders and having weekly conversations with the British Prime Minister, made her really quite a substantial figure. So her advice, although always given privately, was advice that was really worth listening to, and prime ministers did listen to that advice, not in the way of shaping policy, but simply how best to proceed. And I think people across Britain and in many other nations will have a great sense of sadness at her death. She has been a unifying factor. She has very few enemies. I don't think even those who resent Britain's imperial role, and there was a lot that Britain did which was really wrong as an imperial power, I don't think people who are critical of Britain's empire would necessarily be anything other than respectful of the late Queen.
Andrew, staying with you, what can leaders in the new world, in the new generation, emulate from the Queen?
I think kindness, mm-hmm. patience.
There are no kind leaders in the world, you think?
There are lots of kind leaders in the world, but there are lots of leaders who could do with being a little bit more kind, and finding the time to engage with people and making people feeling comfortable. I mean, the one thing about, when you meet the Queen, mm-hmm. it's always for you, it's always it's a really special, memorable occasion, and you're often very nervous. The Queen, of course, is meeting people all the time, and it's routine. Mm-hmm. But she did have a way of making people feel comfortable.
Have you met the Queen?
Every impression. I've met the Queen twice, actually. I met her once when I was covering a Commonwealth conference in Zimbabwe. Uh-huh. And I met her, I was presented to her and spoke to her briefly when she came to open the new BBC headquarters here in London. That would be about 10, 12 years ago, I suppose.
Tell me about your experience then.
Well, they're very warm. I mean, I'm a sort of cynical old journalist, so I don't go gooey about meeting the Queen, except there is something really quite special about it. Mm-hmm. And I did feel a little bit nervous when I was presented to the Queen. You're briefed about what to do and how to address the Queen and what you shouldn't do by a member of the royal household before you meet the Queen, but it's still quite a special occasion. I spent probably 30 seconds in conversation with the Queen, but I remember it very acutely. I've also met prime ministers, and I don't remember every word that they said to me. So it's one of those things that, even, as I say, for people who don't really necessarily think that the monarchy is at the cutting edge of what a modern democracy should be, have a great deal of respect and fond memories for our late Queen.
All right. Andrew, stay with me. I'll just read the statement that the new king issued following the demise of his mother. The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held. Andrew, the reason why I asked about your experience with the Queen is because when the pandemic struck, the new king was finding it very difficult to not shake hands, to not go to the people. Do you think that will change with him now?
Well, I think he's a people person and he enjoys meeting people. He's also got quite a lively intellect. So I'm sure that by instinct he will wish to continue to do that. And I think inevitably when there's a change of monarch, the style of the royal family and the royal household changes too. So I think he will plough his own furrow and he'll do things his own way once he gets into the swing of things. And there's a lot of ceremonial and, of course, a funeral to be had before he really starts to enjoy the space to be a monarch. What I really wonder about is what he will be like in those private weekly meetings with the British Prime Minister. They're never disclosed, their conversations. I think the Queen was a good listener and counsellor. I don't think she gave very much in terms of a policy steer, and I wonder whether the new king might be tempted to be a little bit more interventionist. If he is, there's a risk attached, because one of the reasons why the Queen is so widely admired is because she was seen as non-partisan. She wasn't seen as pro-conservative or pro-Labour. Mm-hmm. She didn't have a view on taxation policy. She didn't have a view that she shared about what was our best energy mix and whether we should have nuclear power or renewables. She was simply a good, silent, constitutional monarch in public on those issues. And I wonder whether the new king will be as wise as his mother in keeping his silence on controversial issues in public.
You're right about that. Andrew, let me introduce to you Adam Schwartz. He's a writer and political commentator. He's joining us from London. Adam, welcome to the broadcast.
Good to be with you.
Now, let me... we've not asked this and we've not talked about this, but what will be the role of the Queen Consort? Andrew?
Well, that's an extremely sensitive question. And for quite a long while, it looked as if Camilla, who of course is the King's second wife, wouldn't be the Queen Consort. But it was clear that Charles really wanted her to be, and the Queen confirmed a year or two back that when the moment came that Camilla would indeed be Queen Consort. Camilla is quite a canny and clever person, and I think she will realise that actually having the status of Queen Consort is great, but probably a low-profile Queen Consort. She certainly won't want to take attention away from her husband, and given, shall we say, the difficult personal life that Charles has been through over the decades, right, I think it might well be wise for Queen Camilla to have a fairly low profile.
Adam, thank you very much for joining our conversation at this hour. I'll ask the same question to you. Do you agree with Andrew about the role of the Queen Consort?
I think I do broadly agree with Andrew, and I think it's interesting that Charles obviously made the decision to make Camilla his formal queen consort. Of course, all monarchs have that prerogative; it's their right to either make them a consort or not. So clearly, Charles has some kind of role in mind. But I think partly it also reflects that Camilla was his second wife, and to some extent, he wants to give Camilla that kind of legitimacy to ensure that she has the proper status as his wife, as you would expect of a king. But I think it will very much depend really on what Charles wants. I mean, I think, as Andrew alluded to, we're kind of living through a situation where I think there's less public appetite for a sort of wider royal family having a huge amount of involvement in the royal household and certainly in public life, mostly due to a huge amount of controversies over the last few decades, and particularly, of course, due to the controversy with Prince Andrew. So I think it's quite likely that we won't see a particularly huge role for her. However, she'll continue to do royal duties. She'll continue to, be involved with charities as she already does. But I think we're probably mainly going to see King Charles III and Prince William, who will presumably become the new Prince of Wales, probably take the prominent role.
Adam, staying with you, what do you think King Charles III will do now? Will he continue with his mother's legacy, or he wants to portray another image of the monarch?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question. I mean, the fact that Elizabeth was queen for 70 years inevitably meant that she sort of molded the role really to the way that she saw it. And I think the way that she saw it really kind of reflected her experiences as a child dealing with her uncle, King Edward, who had a very tumultuous period during his short reign. And to some extent, she wanted to make sure that there was kind of a strict line between politics and the monarchy, ensuring that formal power was properly held in the hands of elected politicians. So I think to some extent, he will partly be impacted quite heavily by his mother's legacy. And of course, Queen Elizabeth, I believe, was the most popular member of the royal household. And so, of course, naturally, he's going to try to want to continue that popularity. But Charles also, made clear during, the last 70 years, which has been, of course, the record-breaking time for someone to be an heir to the throne, the fact that he also has his own preferences and he only has his own way of doing things. And there have been various causes that he's wanted to get involved in, there's various organizations and charities. But I think he's going to have to recognize that obviously there is a very different role between being the former monarch and between a more junior member of the royal household. So I think he will have to have quite a crystal clear understanding of where you should not exert yourself as the king, to ensure that there's no accusations of sort of undue influence as an unelected monarch.
Andrew and Adam, the Queen and also her father, King George VI, lived a very private life. Now you have the new king, King Charles III, and the princes, you have William and you have Harry, who are out in the public and they engage the public. How do you think the monarch will control that? Andrew?
Well, the media is much more intrusive now than it was in the early years of the late Queen's monarchy. There's no doubt about that. And the royal family has paid a very heavy price for that. And we've all witnessed that. I don't think there's any rowing back from that. There are certain ground rules for the British news media. So, for example, Prince William's young children by and large, are not bothered by media intrusion. There are some set-piece events, such as their first day back at school, which was today, where the media is given limited access, but otherwise they're regarded as off limits. But of course it's a two-way sword, because it's the media which gives the royal family the profile, which means that people know what they're doing and which provides them with a platform so they can communicate to their citizens. And I think the Queen used that not altogether wisely at various times in her reign, but broadly well. King Charles, I don't know. I think he will want to have a more contemporary feel to the monarchy. He will want to make it feel less stuffy and less and more 21st century. I think the problem he has is that Charles isn't all that contemporary himself. So it's very difficult for him to reform an institution when actually his ideas now feel a little dated themselves.
Andrew Whitehead, we thank you for all your inputs. We'll have to let you go right now. Thank you for talking to WION today.
Thank you.
Adam, coming back to you, talking about this legacy that the Queen had, you know, of keeping her life private, and also the father had the same legacy of keeping their life private. But now you have King Charles III, you have Prince William, you have Prince Harry. Their life is just out in the public. How will the monarch control that, you think?
Well, I think it's going to be a very interesting period where, of course, the Queen, to some extent, continued some of her father's preferences over privacy. She was, of course, you saw in the statement earlier today, very, very private and sure she sort of didn't want to overshare to some extent. I think Charles will be quite heavily influenced by the younger members of the royal family, particularly Prince William, who will be quite conscious of the fact that, it will still be quite a few years, of course, before he takes over. But he will want Charles to maintain the kind of popularity of the royal family to ensure that when he takes over, actually there is that kind of support for the royal family that ensures stability and sort of the status quo of the constitutional status. So I think we saw, Queen Elizabeth, slowly move to sort of digital platforms, but mainly it was people who were behind the scenes in doing that. And of course, we've seen that the younger members of the royal family, Prince William and Prince Harry, have really taken a much more open approach to this, not only in creating sort of wider opportunities for engagement directly with people, but also talking about a whole range of subjects that were traditionally viewed as taboo. For example, talking about their mental health experiences of losing their mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. So I think it's not only in the format of what they're trying to do, but also in trying to use some of the topics to really connect with people, to really demonstrate that actually they are a modern family. But I think to some extent, Prince Charles won't be quite as open, of course, as Prince William will be. But I think there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on him to really open up. So I think, to some extent, Prince Charles will be the transition between Queen Elizabeth, who was much more of a traditional monarch, towards ultimately the reign of Prince William, who will be much more of a modern monarch. But I think we'll see, as I say, some pressure to make sure that that happens smoothly and effectively.
Adam, stay with me. Kadira Pethiagoda, welcome back. Before I ask you this question, let me just update our viewers on what has happened of late, as the news came out about the death of Her Majesty the Queen at Balmoral. The nearby village of Balata fell silent. The only sound came from the church bells ringing out of Glenwick Church in the center of the village. Talking about the transition, Kadira, from tradition to modernity, do you think King Charles III will do a good job in that?
I think he has the opportunity to do a great job and actually have real impact, because I think the biggest transition we're seeing in terms of eras is not just about technology and about how modern they are in the sort of stylistic sense, but there's a big transition between, I feel, the last century where the public had a very great trust of institutions, not just the monarchy, but of the media, of the democratic process. And we've entered an era now where more people are distrustful of the media, are disillusioned with democracy. And I think there's an opportunity there for a King Charles to really, shape the country and, try and resolve some of these issues, and also, maybe take a more active approach. And I think he has the capacity to do that.
Kadira Pethiagoda, thank you very much for your inputs today and for talking to WION.